Hello, welcome back to another video. So today's video is part of the Crafty Friends blog hop. Crafty Friends is a group of crafters that have all met because of a shared experience during our crafty journey. We've all kind of walked a similar path for a short period of time. And we've gotten together so that we can do a monthly blog hop. We're going to feature brands, products, things that we absolutely love. And this month we've chosen to feature Concord 9th products. So for the card today, I'm actually using two stamp and die sets. So I'm using the Friendship Farms stamp and die sets to do my sentiment panel and my sentiments, and then I'm using the Autumn Harvest stamps and dies to do my images for this card. So I've started out with that Friendship Farms, and I die cut that label, and I kept the negative space so that I could use it to line it up. And I'm going ahead and stamping half of my sentiment. So I'm using a pigment ink. I'm using whipped cream pigment ink. And when you use a pigment ink, when you double stamp it just to get that nice, real solid, crisp stamping, it tends to be a little bit, I don't know, for me, if it's wet on wet, it's kind of a little bit fuzzy when it stamps. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my heat gun, and when you stamp pigment ink initially, there's a little bit of a shine to it, and that's the wet ink sitting on top of the cardstock. So I'm just using my heat gun to kind of knock that back. I'm going to make the sentiment dry down to a matte finish before I stamp the second time on it. So I'm using that negative space from the die cut just to help make sure I've got everything lined up perfectly, because it's got that curved edge on the bottom, and I was just afraid that I wasn't going to get it in there exactly the same way twice. So going ahead and doing the double stamping here, I am using my cloth that I used to clean my stamps off with, just to glide over the top of the door of the MISTI, make sure that the stamp is completely pressed down onto the paper. You can see I got a nice finish there with that stamping. So I'm just going to go ahead and clean that stamp off and get this out of the way. Now keep that negative, because we are going to be stamping again on that sentiment panel. So I have a strip of 4¼ inch wide by 11 inches long cardstock, and I just scored that at 5½. And I'm using some painter's tape and just getting a strip, and I'm putting it on my inside of my wrist to just kind of take down the tackiness a little bit on it. I'm going to put that right over that score line. So I'm blocking off so I can stamp on the front panel of this card directly. I'm going to go ahead and take the pumpkin from the Autumn Harvest stamp set, and I'm going to stamp that with Oatmeal cookie ink. And I just start in the middle of the page, and then I kind of build around it to create this background. Once I have that done, I'm just going to move the ink out of the way. I'm going to take this tape off. If you do it at a sharp angle, it's less likely to tear your cardstock. Then I'm going to go ahead and stamp the pumpkin once more. And then I'm going to pull in the leaf stamp from that same stamp set, that Autumn Harvest stamp set, and I'm going to go ahead and stamp that twice onto this piece of cardstock. I'm going to use the coordinating dies to cut these images out, and I'm using a little bit of micro pour tape on the die just to hold it into place while I run it through my die cut machine. You can use a little bit of washi tape, or had I been actually thinking about it, I could reuse a little bit of that painter's tape that I had used as a mask before. So I'm just going to pop those out of the cardstock and then move that leaf die over to get that second leaf cut out. So now we're done with the die cutting, so I can get that out of the way. And I'm putting down a sheet of type paper just as some scratch paper with it. This is a Sofft tool. This is a tool that allows me to put PanPastels on my image. So I put a little sponge on that, and I'm going to go ahead and use PanPastels on the image. And this first one, this olive green color, is called Hansa Yellow, extra dark. And I will have everything listed in the description on YouTube as well as on my blog in terms of the colors that I'm using, because I'm probably going to butcher a couple names here. But I'm just very lightly putting this on my images. And you can actually build up the PanPastel to get a little bit of dimension with your image. This maroony color is called Permanent Red, extra dark. And you can see when you very first bring your tool to your image, the first place you touch is going to be the darkest. So the most pigment is going down the first place that you touch. So I'm kind of rubbing it off a little bit on the type paper first, just so that I can get some of the heaviest part of the pigment kind of knocked off that sponge. These sponge tips are great too, because you have both sides that you can work with. So you see that I'm kind of like flipping it back and forth as I'm working, and that's just to make sure that I don't muddle the colors together. So the brown that I used was actually Burnt Sienna shade, and then this kind of orangey brown that I'm using now is called Burnt Sienna. And I'm just working it up from the bottom. One of the great things with these PanPastels is if you do happen to get some smeared somewhere, it erases. And I'm just showing you here that you can just actually use a regular pink eraser to just erase that off of your surface. So I'm building up a little bit more color on the bottom edge of that pumpkin. These stamps are great because they actually do show you where your shading should go. And I just realized I had a little piece of that micro pour tape that got stuck on there. Craft fails. So this is the Diarylide yellow that I'm using, and I'm just bringing that in from the top to kind of create the highlight. This will actually blend in with that sienna color and give more of that orangey pumpkin look. I love the PanPastels for really fast coloring. And it's kind of nice because they're a little bit more matte than a colored pencil tends to be. So I'm just making sure that that pigment ink is really good and dry. And off camera, I used my powder tool on that panel as well because I want to make sure that nothing sticks to that pigment ink. So I'm going to go ahead and line it up in the negative. And then I am going to go ahead and stamp the pumpkin portion of the sentiment in clear pigment ink so that I can heat emboss. So just making sure that stamp is completely pressed down everywhere. When I lifted it up, I just decided to do a second stamp with that clear pigment ink just to make sure that there was really good tackiness on the paper to pick up that embossing powder. So I'm using copper embossing powder. I kind of was a little careful when I poured it because I was really concerned that it was going to stick to that pigment ink still. Making sure my heat gun is hot, and then I'm going to go ahead and just melt that down. It's always like magic watching the embossing powder melt. Now that that is down, I'm going to go ahead and start assembling my card. So I'm putting a foam square on the left-hand side of the pumpkin and sticking that on my label. And then I'm double stacking the foam square to put on the outside of the pumpkin because I'm going to put additional foam squares on the back of the label. And I was right to the end of the sheet of these foam squares, so I just decided to go ahead and use them all. I love my foam squares, let me tell you. So I'm going to go ahead and line that up so I know where to put my leaves. Now, I have a little craft fail here. I forgot to burp my adhesive the last time I used it and clear the air out of the nozzle, so it actually was kind of like clogged up. Rather than mess with it, I just went and grabbed another bottle of adhesive, and I used my finger to kind of spread that across the back of the leaf so that it just adhered down. Left a little bit of adhesive on the back of my finger, so you'll see I'll just swipe that on the second leaf when I'm adhering it down. One more tiny dab of that glue and that will hold the leaf down completely. Then I'm going to go ahead and remove the backers off my foam squares and attach my sentiment panel to the card front. Get that folded in half and get a nice crease using my bone folder. Then I'm going to go ahead and use some Simply White Nuvo drops to add a little bit of embellishment to that sentiment panel. And that's going to finish off the card for today. If you want to continue hopping with us as part of the Crafty Friends blog hop, I will have the link to the next stop on my blog as well as in the description on YouTube. I will also have supply lists in both locations showing all the products that I used in the creation of this card. There is a second card made using the same supplies over on my blog. So if you're watching on YouTube, be sure to hop on over and see that second card. I hope you have a wonderful day. Much love to you all. Thanks for watching.